Okay, we are rolling.
Rolling.
We were supposed to have a co-producer at this point.
We were.
We're rolling, and as the D baby just said off cam, we were supposed to have two producers at this point. She's literally due today, the day that I'm recording this. For you guys, this will be the day after her due date. So maybe we'll have a baby by the time you guys hear this. But that said, it's been a very hectic and wild weekend. Delaney was about 39 and a half weeks pregnant when I left her all alone. I went to go play AVP New Orleans. Wilson ran away, blown away by a biblical storm, 58 miles per hour winds, and exploded. It's been wild. We've had two challengers and an AVP in New Orleans since I last chatted with you guys. So it's been a huge, busy weekend, and I could be leaving for the hospital at any moment. But that said, nothing stops me from talking about Olympic beach volleyball. Baby be damned. And we have a lot to chat about. So we had two events in Brazil. We had a challenge in Itapema, Brazil, and then we had one right after, the week later, in Saquarema, a new stop that's also a stop on the World Surf League. I only know that because of Tri, obviously. But it was a huge 2 weeks for the whole Federation of Brazil. Last time I chatted about the road to Paris was after Tepic, where Brazil had 0 teams in the main draw. It was the first time in history that a major event had not included a Brazilian team in a main draw, in an event in which they sent their top teams. And then I said it's a Scandinavian sport. Brazil is struggling, but that this would be a big month for Brazil because it's in Brazil. They have a massive home court advantage. Their fans show up, and Brazil took advantage. George and Andre won gold in Itapema, their third straight gold medals in Itapema. I call them Thanos because they're inevitable. They're the kings of Itapema. They've won 18 straight matches in Itapema, and they've won 24 consecutive matches and 4 straight gold medals when you go to Brazil as a whole. And so for George and Andre, any event in Brazil is a huge opportunity. And then the next week, Evandro and Arthur win gold. It's Evandro's first gold medal since 2019 in Warsaw, Poland, with Bruno Schmidt, who's now retired and pursuing a career in law. And it is the first gold medal for his young partner, Arthur Mariano. Now, a couple weeks before, I'd actually chatted with Rich Lamborn, and I wondered if we were sort of seeing the downfall of Evandro. He hadn't really performed in a while, and then bam, that text to Rich did not age well. Evandro wins a gold medal. It's an electric final as well. It was so fun to watch because it included one of the most unlikely teams, Chase Budinger and Miles Evans. They have entered the chat, ladies and gentlemen. They looked pretty bad, to be totally frank, in Itapema. They barely got out of the first round of the qualifier. They played a good young team from Switzerland in Jonathan Jordan and Emmanuel Zerker, but honestly, it took Jordan and Zerker kind of threw it away. And so Miles and Chase won that one 17-15 in the third set, and then they kind of got slapped around pretty good by Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander. I'll have more on them in a minute. And I honestly figured when I saw the draw of the qualifier in Saquarema that might be the last international event we'd see from Chase and Miles, because they had Adrielson and Arthur da Silva of Brazil. And if you haven't heard of them, I don't blame you. They don't travel a ton, but they are so dang good. They've won a couple Brazilian Tour events. They won a couple one-stars, or Adrielson did anyway. And the word from a lot of the Brazilian federation is that Adrielson was sort of the next Guto-type player. And so I saw that draw, and I thought, well, you have a really good Brazilian team to beat. And then if you win, you get the blessing of playing France's Remy Bassero and Julian Lenil, who had just beaten Sweden and taken a 5th in La Paz, and Sweden is now widely considered the number 2 team in the world. So that's your draw in the qualifier, and I figured there's no chance that they make it out. I wasn't betting on them. And then what do you know? Not only do they beat Adrielson and Arthur da Silva, not only do they beat Remy Bassero and Julian Lenil, they won 21-9, 21-12. Against France. Lenil could do nothing. Bassero's block, which gave Kame Shock fits and nightmares and cold sweats, he did nothing. Chase and Miles were absolutely dominant. And then they moved on, beat Miles Partain and Andy Benish in the first round of the main draw. They beat Steven van de Velde and Matthew Immers of the Netherlands, and van de Velde has one of the nastiest floats I've seen in my entire life. Go all the way to the gold medal match, beat Julian Horrell and Alex Horst of Austria, who had a tremendous tournament, finished in bronze. Silver medal, and that is a humongous move for Budinger and Evans, especially since Saquarema is the last challenge event that they're going to get for a long time. The next challenge isn't until Yermala in mid-June. So unless they can get into an Elite 16, I don't think they'll have the entry points to do so, which the next Elite 16 is in Uberlandia. I'll follow up in a couple weeks about that. But then after that is Ostrava at the end of May. So for the last international event, for about a month and a half, 2 months for Chase and Miles, massive, absolutely massive, hugely important for the Americans to get a silver medal, and hugely important for Miles Partain and Andy Benish as well. Another big winner of the last 2 weeks. They took a 5th in Itapema, and that 5th is somewhat, in retrospect, it seems almost divine because they looked awful in their first match against Hungary. They lost 11-21. Theo theoremed them. Now, Hungary probably didn't know what the Theo theorem is. It's when if you beat a team 21-12 or worse in the first set, the odds of you winning the second set are unbelievably low. It's hilarious. Once you see this trend, you cannot unsee it. And so Andy Miles, they lose 21-11, end up winning the next 2 sets, 21-19, I believe, smashed them in the third, end up qualifying, beating Alisson. Talk about a nightmare draw, beating Alisson in the qualifier. Good heavens. They beat Evandro and Arthur in the 9th place rounds in that one, and then they took George and Andre to 3. They were the first team to take a set of George and Andre, so they took a 5th in Itapema, come back through the qualifier in Saquarema, end up taking a 4th in Saquarema, so they have a 5th and a 4th, and they are now ranked number 25 in the Olympic rankings, despite having just 2 finishes. So a huge, huge tournament for Andy Miles, not only just in their finishes, but in how they played. Andy Benish led both tournaments, both Itapema and Saquarema, in total blocks. It's his blocking. He's always been a very good, fantastic blocker, and one that I'm never comfortable playing against. But now no one's comfortable playing against Andy Benish. He's averaging almost 3 blocks per set. The world-class standard that you want to hit is 1.75. And he's averaging almost 3. That's Hendrik Mol led Itapema in blocks per set with 3.1, which is unbelievable. And so big weekend for Chase and Miles, big weekend for the Brazilian Men's Federation as a whole, back-to-back gold medals for them, and a huge one for Miles and Andy. But the part that I really want to mention about Itapema and Saquarema, it's just everyone is good. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, but Kame Shock and Try, when we had them on last week, Kame was talking about just how ridiculously good everyone is. There's probably, you have Anders and Christian of Norway, clearly the number 1 team in the world. And then you have Sweden's David Amann and Jonathan Helvig, widely regarded as the number 2. And then you have a kind of a 3 through 30 where everyone can just beat everyone. Hendrik Mol and Matthias Berntsen took a bronze in Itapema, and then they barbecued out of Saquarema. Lithuania's Audrius Kanasis and Patrikas Stankovičius, elite name, by the way. Haven't seen them much. They're a talented team. Don't travel a whole lot. Well, they sweep Cuba out of the qualifier, end up having a couple good wins in the main draw. Out of nowhere. Sam Schachter and Dan Deering, number 1 team in Canada. 5th in La Paz, lost in the qualifier to Portugal's Hugo Campos and Joao Pedrosa. So anyone can beat anyone at this point, and it's wild. And a lot of fans, I'm sure, are having the debate is the men's tour really, really good? Is that why there's so much parity? Or is it sort of everyone is in this morass of mediocrity? And it is the former. Everyone is so freaking good. The talent level is so high. Alex Horst was in the World Championship Finals in 2017, one of the best players in Austrian history. Ageless. He's kind of the John Hayden of Austria. Now he's winning bronze medals. Him and Julian Horrell are the number 1 ranked Olympic team in Austria, ahead of Moritz Pristaus and Robin Seidel, ahead of Philip Waller and Martin Ermakora. It's dense. This race is dense. Now, for the rest of the Americans in Brazil, just going to do my North American report while I'm on the topic of the guys. The Itapema Challenge, I think, is the best proxy for how this quad is going to go for the American men. You have Miles and Andy, who took a 5th, but could have very easily lost in the qualifier to Hungary. You have the Taylors, who in my mind put together perhaps the most brilliant 17th place finish in the history of 17th place finishes. They're working with Evie Matthews now, or at least temporarily. I don't know if they've gone with him full time. But the first thing that Evie did was switch Taylor Sander to the left And I think it's a tremendous move. Taylor Crabb has proven very talented when he's on the right. That's where he played when him and Trevor made their debut on the AVP Tour and the FIVB Tour. That's where he played with Paul Lotman when he won a bronze medal and a fifth in Dubai last fall. And so Taylor Crabb, very comfortable on the right. Taylor Sander, as an outside hitter, is a natural fit on the left. And now they have the extra threat of Taylor Sander optioning. And so they're not going to peak right away. I think they're going to continue to improve. And I was honestly pretty impressed with what I saw from them in Itapema and Saquarema. Despite the fact that they didn't qualify, they lost a heartbreaker to Yves Hausner and Quentin Matral of Switzerland in that qualifier. But it's not that they played bad. And I'm seeing Taylor Crabb, I think, is playing with a level of focus that I have never seen from him before, where he is just dialed in, full effort the whole time. But they ended up taking this 17th. They were up 14-11 in the first round against Steven Van de Velde and Matthew Immers and just lost a heartbreaker, honestly. And with the way that these challenge formats are, if you lose your first round of pool, it's so difficult because you're very likely going to be put into the lucky loser rounds, which 4 of the third place finishers in pool play will be lucky losers. The top 2 will go straight to 9th place. So that first round of pool play in a challenge is so very important. And Sander and Crabb were right there. They're at 14-11, had 3 match points, just missed to an excellent, very talented team from the Netherlands. And that changes the whole tournament. They had a lot of grit and toughness in a 16-14 win in 3 over Sam Schachter and Dan Deering to move on. And then they lost to Cuba, who was just on a heater in Itapema. And so I was pretty impressed with what I saw from Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander. The end result wasn't there, as you guys could see as well. They took a 17th. They didn't qualify in Saquarema, and now that they're going to have a pretty long break internationally until Yermala, most likely, unless they get a wild card. But American teams, we don't host events, so we're just very unlikely to be getting wild cards. Then you had Trevor Crabb and Theo Brunner, took a 5th in Saquarema, and just a week before, they barbecued in Itapema. Triborn and Kame Schock took a 5th in Itapema, but they went to 3 every single match and required a comeback from down 7-12 to Poland's Piotr Kantor and Maciej Rudol. And it's just the way it's going to go for the Americans. It's just going to be up and down and peaks and valleys and inconsistencies. And that's just not just for the Americans. That's pretty much for every single men's team outside of Anders and Christian and Sweden. And really, they're not even immune to any of that either. Because we saw Sweden, they took a 9th in La Paz, and then they won Tepic the next week. So this men's race is just going to be absolutely bananas. And the men's American race is getting wilder and wilder because of that silver medal finish from Chase and Miles, and because of the 4th and 5th from Partain and Andy Benish. Now, switching to the women's, you guys did request that I split up the men's and women's and not hop back and forth. So the biggest winners from the women's, the Italians, Valentina Gottardi and Marta Menegatti, after they took a 5th in the Tepic Elite 16, or a 4th, pardon me, in the Tepic Elite 16. I mentioned that they were on the rise. Might be some raw moments from Valentina, might not be super polished quite yet, and then bam, win a gold medal, the first gold medal for Valentina Gottardi in her young and very, very promising career. They were excellent. Now, Valentina, she led Tepic in blocks, led Tepic in aces. It was not an exception. She was 3rd in Saquarema in blocks, and she was 1st in Saquarema by 8 in total aces. So she is legit. Put that stamp of approval. I'm here. I'm on board the hype train for Valentina Gottardi and Marta Menegatti. Now, the Brazilian women also had a massive 2 weeks. Again, the home court advantage in Brazil cannot be overstated. They just win medal after medal after medal after medal at home. 3 different Brazilian women's teams won medals in Itapema and Saquarema, and none of them were Duda and Ana Patricia, who are one of the best teams in the world and are actually the 5th-ranked Brazilian team in the Olympic ranks. I'm just going to let that settle in and blow your mind for a minute, because when I was talking to Delaney earlier about that, it was wild. Now, Thamela Corradelli and Talita Antunes, I believe, are the top-ranked Brazilian team. It's a bit misleading because they have the most finishes. They're one of the few teams in the world with 5 Olympic finishes at the moment. Most teams have 3. The occasional team has 4. So it's a bit inflated. But then you have Taina Silva and Vitoria de Souza. They took a or it's Victoria Lopez and Tana Silva. They took a silver in Saquarema. Barbara and Carol, they took a silver in Itapema and actually had a brutal first round draw with Toledo and Themela. They won 19-17 in that first round. Huge win for them to keep Toledo and Themela at bay a little bit. Won that silver medal. And then you had Andressa Cavalcanti and Vittoria De Souza. They won a bronze in Saquarema. So the top 15 teams in the world in the Olympic ranks right now, 5 of them are Brazilians, with the last ranked being Ana Patricia and Duda, and 3 of them are from the United States of America. It's just the Brazil-U.S. rivalry on the women's side is alive and very, very well. The other big winner from Itapema and Saquarema was Terese Cannon and Sarah Sponcil. They won a bronze medal. Terese Cannon loves Itapema. That was kind of her breakout moment on the World Tour a couple years ago with Sarah Hughes. Won a bronze medal, did a little footloose dancing, and then again, back dancing on the podium with Sarah Sponcil. I think that they have established themselves as the clear number 3 American team. Now, I know they had kind of a disappointing finish in AVP New Orleans, ended up getting knocked out by Betsy Flint and Julia Scholes, who are kind of in that 3-4 discussion for who is that 3rd and 4th ranked American team. But Terese and Sponcil, Terese is evolving. She was a bit streaky kind of throughout her career. That was sort of her Achilles heel, was that she'd be a streaky server, streaky passer, streaky offensive player. And she's not. They were brilliant in a bronze medal match against Switzerland's Esme Bobner and Zoe Verger-Dupre, who have also rebounded nicely from a tough start at the beginning of the year. But Terese was just rock solid. She was awesome. And now they are the number 3 ranked American team in the Olympic ranks behind Kelly Chang and Sarah Hughes, who are still number 1 in the world, and behind Kristen Nuss and Taryn Cloth. Shout out to them. TKN, rocking their shirt, always supporting my fellow Americans. The other big winner from the Brazilian challengers, China. Chen Xu and Xin Yi Xia. Now, Xia, last year, I watched her play a lot. She won 5 medals with Mei Mei Lin, and Xia, she was an Olympian. Very, very good, just 26 years old. But every time I watched her, I just thought, if China could get her an elite blocker, she is going to be dangerous. And now she has Chen Xu, a 2008 bronze medalist in the Beijing Olympic Games, a 2013 world champ. And they are fantastic. They won a gold medal in Itapema. It was Xia's first gold in a major event in quite some time. And I think that puts them firmly on the map as an elite level team. And China hasn't had an elite team probably since Chen Xu won that world championship in 2013. They're good. They took a 9th in Saquarema, which it's always tough to follow up a gold medal tournament and then go the very next week. So gold medal, 9th, Xin Yi Xia and Chen Xu. Legit, hype train, counting them on there. Now for the final section of our road to Paris, the struggle bus. Who's on the struggle bus? Martin Ermacora and Philip Waller, they were one of the newly reformed Austrian teams. They haven't quite found their stride. In 4 events this year, they've taken a 9th, a 21st, another 9th, and a 19th. They barbecued out of Saquarema. My boys, Dan Deering and Sam Schachter, they're playing good volleyball, but they're not winning. They took a 5th in La Paz, which is solid. They had a huge opportunity, and Itapema got wild-carded into the main draw, ended up barbecuing out of that one, losing 0-2, losing a very close one to Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander. And then in Saquarema, they lose a heartbreaker in 3. Again, another close one in 3 to Portugal's João Pedrosa and Hugo Campos. And it's just a matter of winning's a skill. And I know I'm biased here because I'm good friends with them, podcast with them. And I think Triborn has that skill where you just see it. When it's 10-10 in the 3rd set, Tri just finds a way. When they were down 7-12 against Poland and Itapema, he just sort of found a way and went nuts. Had 3 blocks and an ace in the last 10 points against Poland. And that's that extra gear that I think Sam and Dan are looking for and need to find in order to qualify for Tokyo and do some damage, as Sam and Dan said when they came on the podcast a couple weeks ago. So they're finishing-wise, they're on the struggle bus. I'm putting them in there because they need some good finishes. They're going to be stuck in these challenge qualifiers, and you just don't want to be in there. The other men's team on the struggle bus joining them, my guy Marco Kratinger. Love him, such a good dude. Him and Florian Breer have just had a tough start to the year. They took in a 25th, a 21st, a 17th, and in Saquarema, they barbecued out, took a 19th. So brutal start to the year for Marco and Florian. And adding a little insult to injury for them is how well Yves Hausner and Quentin Matral played. They played fantastic in Saquarema. For the women, Germans Julia Sud and Isabel Schneider, I predicted them to qualify for Tokyo. Has not been the most promising of starts for Germany's, in my mind, number 2 team behind Sinja Tillman and Svenja Müller. They are 1-7 in matches this year. So of 8 matches, they've won just 1. Not the best start for Germany. The next, my good friends Corinne Quiggle and Sarah Skirmerhorn, Skerzy. They're 0-3 in qualifiers. It breaks my heart because traveling on the World Tour, there's so much pressure. It's so expensive. And then they've lost in the last round of the qualifier 3 events in a row. Just brutal. And especially brutal because they have skipped AVPs in order to do so, where they would have been main draw, where they would have been making money. And so they're going to have to find some magic, and they're going to have to wait at least until Yermala in June to get back on the World Tour. So hopefully playing AVP Huntington, playing another tour series on the AVP will kind of get them back on track, but they're going to have to start getting wins on the World Tour, or they're going to find themselves so far out of the race this early. Because right now, as I mentioned in our last Road to Paris, it's really just a race to world champs right now. You take your best 6 finishes of the year to qualify for world championships in October, and they're running out of time in order to do so. The last team I'm putting on the struggle bus for the women is Lena Plesiuchnig and Katharina Skutzenhofer of Austria. I also predicted them to qualify for the Olympics. Their best finish of the year is just a 19th in Saquarema, so that is just making the main draw and then barbecuing out. So not the best finish, not the best start to the year for any teams on the struggle bus. Not ruling them out. Again, I'm just making you guys aware of the teams who are struggling at the moment. There isn't really many other teams to cover in my final section, the North American report. Haley Harward and Kelly Kalinsky, they were the only American female team in the main draw in Saquarema. It was odd not to see them, not to see any other Americans in the main draw. They won pool, got a great start, and then again they took a 9th. They're sort of stuck in this 9th place holding pattern, and they just need one big breakthrough event. I think, again, it's a new team trying to find their stride. They're close. They're right there. It's just tantalizing, but they haven't quite pulled out the big wins. And I think if they could get a medal, and same goes with Betsy Flint and Julia Scholes, that 4th American spot right now is wide open because you have Kelly Chang and Sarah Hughes. Then you have Kristen Nuss and Taryn Cloth. I think no problem. They're going to be in world champs. Terese Cannon and Sarah Sponcil have a little bit of an edge, but that 4th spot is still pretty wide open. And it's for Kelly Kalinsky and Haley Harward, kind of theirs for the grabbing at the moment. They need that big breakthrough. So the next Elite 16 is in Uberlandia. That is just a week after this will come out. I will have another Road to Paris following that one. That will be our May Road to Paris after Uberlandia. After that is an Elite 16 in the Czech Republic, Ostrava, the Steel Jungle. That is at the end of May. And then we're kind of hitting it hard after that. So May is a pretty empty month. We're just going to have an AVP in Huntington Beach in mid-May. And as far as international goes, after Uberlandia, we got about a month. So as always, super fun hanging out with you guys on the road to Paris. And I will catch y'all in a couple weeks after Uberlandia. Shoots.